And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, as always, and joined by me, as always, again, Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Want to go ahead and thank everyone who's tuning in live, as well as our audio listeners. Please do subscribe to us on our Patriots 4th and 2 YouTube channel, as well as liking, sharing, or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Patriot, or the, we're talking about different Patriots news, the Super Bowl results, the NFL Combine coming up, some free agency talk, and again, a guest sponsor is Steve's dog, who's snoring underneath his desk right now by his feet. So if you hear that in the background, that would be the noise. But before we do anything, as always, Steve, what's up, man?
Yeah, another great day in God's country down here. My dog is obviously enthused with Super Bowl talk by this point.
Yeah.
It sounds like a motorboat going in the background. But no, I mean, the Super Bowl is always a bittersweet day, regardless of who's playing, because now there won't be another, football game until August. So, things will happen quickly, though. I mean, as we'll go to the scouting combine and free agency starts, then we get into draft season. And everyone gets excited or depressed, depending on how that goes. And then, OTAs and, mini camps and training camps start.
Right. I mean, you and I both know this well, just being, around the sport and everything else for so long. It really is a calendar year event. You do get a couple month gap, and it's kind of boring. If you're covering it full time, I'm sure it's euphoric. But it's one of those things where usually the NFL calendar dominates, and we'll get to the Super Bowl in a second because there are some things to pick from that. The results, the result, the gameplay, the legacy aspect. We'll get to some of those things in a second. But as far as the calendar goes, Steve, I mean, we're 15 days away from the NFL scouting combine. We're going to kick things into high gear here. If you're listening to this show, let's be honest, you're probably a pretty big fan of the team, and you want to go ahead and see the team building aspect. And that's something that I pride this podcast on. Yeah, we're going to talk about some things that every single other Patriots podcast is going to talk about, but we'll give our takes on that. But I also want to make sure that we always are kind of a year-round thing, and you and I have always prided ourselves on how much we love the team building aspect in the offseason and so many different things. So we're going to be able to go ahead and make it really fun for the next couple months. It's going to be diagnosing the current roster, kind of doing a little bit of an autopsy, going through the rumor mill and everything that the results from the measurements and the weigh-ins of Indy, because that will have an effect on the draft board, the free agency aspect of it all, and then obviously the draft and then kind of the OTAs, mini camps, etc., and kind of go from there. So we are a year-long podcast. We've been doing that for over a decade plus. For some of those people who are newer listeners or first-time listeners, we do this all the time, and it's a really great time. So to your point, I think you said it really well. It is a bittersweet time for the Super Bowl, whether you're in it or not, because it means that the season's over, which is definitely always a bummer. It hasn't really hit me yet, Steve, but it just sucks to be like, you know what, Sunday, like, oh, we're going to go ahead and we got nothing to do today. I guess we'll have to do some yard work. We're going to have to go to the I'm going to have to go I'm going to have to go spray some weeds for the wife in the front yard. I'm going to have to go to the farmer's market and pick up some freaking blueberries. I don't want to do that, but that's where we're at on Sundays now that they're free.
I know. Well, we already started that this week, so
sure.
Yeah, plenty of yard work to be done.
Yeah,
so
of course,
and that's okay during the week, but man, I miss already Patriots Sunday. So it is what it is.
Well, let me ask you a question, kind of a curveball question, but going to the games, what were your thoughts on the postseason in general? Any before we get to the Super Bowl, we're about to jump into our Super Bowl thoughts. But like, do you have any thoughts on the postseason in general?
Um, there was some surprises, obviously, and there is every year. I mean,
Of course,
there's always a couple of upsets. There's a Cinderella team or two that always,
I think the
makes.
Commanders were the biggest surprise of the postseason.
Yep. Yeah, and I was just going to get to them.
Yep.
For them getting as far as they did, you give them all the credit in the world. It was funny because Philly was kind of an afterthought for a lot of the season, and then they just kept kind of building and building, and you know, I thought they came on really well at the end of the year, and they were, even though a lot of people had picked them um, at the end of the regular season to go to the Super Bowl, people weren't really talking about Philly that much. You know,
They
it
kind of
was.
reminded me their run at the end of the season, going into the postseason, kind of reminded me of the Patriots in 2019 versus the Rams, where they had that run that it wasn't really a whole lot going on, and then they kind of flipped a switch, and it was just like building, building, building. I mean, they basically blew out their last two opponents by what 50 something points. I mean, I can look
Mhm.
it up while we're on the air, but I mean, it was a slow build for them. Like they always had the talent, they always had the roster. We knew about all that. Also, want to give Jalen Hurts his flowers, and we'll get to that in a second because he was excellent, especially the last two games. Like really, really well. Played really well down the stretch. I mean, Saquon didn't do a whole lot in the Super Bowl per se, but he got them in that conversation, so that was huge. But I mean, the Eagles really did kind of build themselves up to that point.
Mhm. Yeah, they had a great year. I mean, they got off to a kind of a slow start, but they kept their nose to the grindstone and they were winning every week. It kept going on and on. And again, I mean, everyone was talking about Buffalo and they were talking about the Lions and Kansas City and Eagles were mentioned a lot in there, but nobody was really. I don't know if people were giving them enough due of what they were doing.
I thought the Ravens and Bills personally were better teams than the Chiefs. And this isn't. I mean, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, so this isn't like I'm breaking any news or anything. I thought they were better teams than the Chiefs, but they ultimately fell short in the moment. And you got to give the Chiefs credit where credit's due. They were able to overcome that and get there. I mean, all you have to do is get in the dance. You just need a ticket to get into the dance. You never know what's going to happen. That's just sports, and that's why the sport is great. Uh, the Commanders too. I mean, go to the Lions. It's like I thought the Lions were about as poised and well balanced to go ahead and make a legit run, and they were knocked out early. I mean, so that's just one of those things where, sure, you can go ahead and bitch and moan about a team maybe not getting something done. That you were hoping for them to do, but at the same time, it's not a 7-game series. It's not the NBA where it's best out of 7. It's a one game. That's why the phrase is any given Sunday and
Yep.
the postseason Saturday. But I mean, overall, pretty exciting postseason. There were some upsets. I still would have liked to see the Ravens there instead of the Chiefs, but again, the Chiefs deserve to be there. And let's just dive into the game, Steve. 40-22, Eagles just absolutely thumped the Chiefs to win the Eagles' second straight, or not second straight Super Bowl. To
Second Super Bowl.
halt the Chiefs from winning 3 straight Super Bowls, and for the Eagles to end up winning their second franchise championship. Um, Man, what a game! Really, really thought it was. Man, there's so many ways we can go about this, Steve. I'm not sure exactly how you want to do it, but let's just say this: I thought the Chiefs were going to come out hot, and I thought that it would be a back and forth type of game, and I thought that the game would eventually be in the Chiefs' hands, and whether that was Patrick Mahomes having the ball or the defense making a play at the end, I thought that there was a really good chance that they could go ahead and pull it out. Now, going back to last week, I thought the Eagles were going to win 27-23. I thought they were a better team. I thought they had a good running game, and the line play in the trenches I thought would be the difference. Now, the only thing that really came out of fruition was of that is that the Eagles did come out relatively hot, and that the line play in the trenches for Philadelphia was solid. But there were some interesting things happening. I thought we can get to the officiating calls, the first one or two, and then it got real quiet, and we'll get to that in a second because I definitely want to bring that up. But overall, the Eagles controlled the game. They dictated everything, and Kansas City just looked unprepared, Steve.
Yeah, I think, I think the moment for them got it made them a little tight, because, we've seen that. Teams like the Patriots who won all the time, they got into that Super Bowl in 2007, and, they had a chance to rewrite history, and I think they got a little tight. Mm-hmm. I don't think they came out well at all, and, it set the tone for the game. But the other thing that set the tone was the Giants' defensive line dominated the Patriots' offensive line, and I think we saw the same thing on Sunday. You and
I talked off air. You and I talked off air before the show started. I mean, I know the MVP for the Super Bowl went to Jalen Hurts, and I'm not saying he wasn't deserving because he had a very good game. But to me, if it was me making the choice, it would have gone to the defensive line of the Eagles as a whole because they, to me, dictated the entire game.
Yeah, I when we talked offline, that's what I thought was actually going to happen. That if they didn't give it to all of them, they were going to give it to one of them, and because I thought those guys were the difference in the game. Kansas City, until I would say late in the third quarter, was still stuck on 60 yards of offense. And
they only had one first down in the entire first half.
Yes.
Yep.
And those touchdowns at the end, I thought those were all garbage time. Not taking anything away from the throws or the catches, but let's call it what it is. That game was over.
Let's call it what it is. The Eagles looked like a better prepared team throughout the week. They looked like they were ready to play. The Chiefs looked overwhelmed, a little bit under pressure. They looked unprepared, and Patrick Mahomes probably played the worst game I've ever seen him play. Let's not be afraid to say this. Mahomes is a great quarterback. There's no denying that. There's no denying what his success has been to this part of the league. If you want to go ahead and talk about legacies with Brady and comparing the Chiefs and Patriots dynasties, we can go ahead and do that. But at the same time, it's okay. There have been games where Brady hasn't played his best, but man, I've never seen him show up with a 0 on the scoreboard quite like that. And we did talk about this the other day, also offline, of course, because as we joked before, we talk to each other more than we talk to our wives,
which they remind us of constantly.
When the Patriots played the Falcons and they were down 28-3, you were sitting there saying, I can't believe what's happening. As a Patriots fan, I mean, I can't believe what's happening. How are they going to climb back into this? Okay, all you need is a play. We got to eliminate some mistakes. Whatever. For this game, as a neutral observer, all I could think about, Steve, was that it wasn't that the Chiefs were making mistakes. I mean, they were making mistakes. I'm not saying that they weren't, but I'm saying it wasn't just that they were making mistakes. It was that the Eagles were controlling the game. It wasn't like, Brady throwing a pick six to who was that? Like Robert Alford or whatever, who returned it. It wasn't like something like that. It was like, man, Mahomes has no time and Jalen Hurts has all the time. And it's just kind of just it's just being dictated by exactly what Philly wanted to do. And so going to the halftime, you were just like, as a neutral observer or probably a Chiefs fan, being like, what do you do to go ahead and fix this? Because it looked like they had no answers. Like they just were given a test they didn't get to study for at all. And I put that again a little bit to the pressure, a little bit to everything else. Again, I thought Mahomes was really bad. Now, to Mahomes' credit, I mean, he didn't get much help from a lot of people. I mean, Travis Kelce, 2 drops. Hopkins, who's been so good, with his hand throughout his career, had several drops. Worthy, like you mentioned, he had some garbage time stats, but he participated a bit. They couldn't get the run game going. Andy Reid made no adjustments. It just felt like the whole thing came out flat. And the only thing that the Chiefs did well, Steve, all night, I thought, was control Saquon. It was like when you watch Hard Knocks and they're doing those team meetings, it's like Andy Reid and whoever else came out and was like, hey, objective 1 is to stop 26. And they did that. But then they didn't do anything else, and it was like they came up empty-handed. They looked like they were trying to cradle grains of sand.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I go back to Mahomes, because as we saw all year, the Chiefs were not the type of offense they have been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They were winning. They were grinding out wins every week, but they weren't lighting it up like we've seen them do in the past. They were able to turn it on, at the end of games and pull, a lot of really close 1-score games out. And that's a sign of a really good football team. But, all season long, what was Mahomes doing? He was taking what was there. He was being patient. And, he just played for the next down. Midway through the first half, I want to say, I was watching him and I'm like, he's rattled.
Oh, he was rattled. He was rattled.
He's not taking what's there. He's trying to force everything for like these big plays and, these splash plays. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not a good recipe for winning this game, because they're coming after you. And you have to make them pay for coming after you.
The problem, though, Steve, is, to your point, though, is that they're coming after him, and they were consistently blitzing 4. They blitzed once the entire game. That was called back by. No. They blitzed once, but it was called back by a penalty. So they didn't blitz. To your point, they didn't blitz actually any play. So they had a 45. He dropped back 42 times, I want to say, and 45% in the first half he was under pressure, and they were doing it with 4 guys. So to your point, it's like you got to make them pay. Well, they're dropping 7, so they're dropping 7 in coverage. So it's like Cooper DeJean, Blankenship, Quinyon Mitchell, like they're not biting on screens. They're playing cover 2 shell a lot of the time. They're going ahead and covering things over the top. So he had nowhere to go with it, and he looked about as rattled as Brady. As Brady did in 07, to go back to the Giants point, because there was nothing really to do, because everything was covered. He couldn't hold on to the ball long enough for guys to get open, and he couldn't do a screen because they were playing so close, because they knew that their guys could beat them up front, and that's what happened.
Well, I just thought the short passing game, they kind of ditched that, and that was their bread and butter all year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no one threw more passes behind the line behind the line of scrimmage or behind the 5-yard line more than Patrick Mahomes this year.
Yep. And they weren't doing that. They were trying to, air it out as soon as they got behind. And I'm thinking to myself, at the time it was maybe 10-0. And I mean, that's not insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. But then when it got 17-0, now you're starting to say, whoa, here we go. We don't know what's going to happen next, but this next score is going to really determine which way this game goes. And, he threw that second pick to Zach Bond, which was a great interception,
play,
by the way. Oh, my God.
Great play. Would love to see Zach Bond in the Patriots uniform next year, but he's a free agent too, so we'll probably get to that.
But we'll talk about him in just a short while. But that right there, I mean, and they had the ball. It was in field goal range, I believe. You know, when he picked that off, and next thing you know, they're going into the half at 24-0, and you could see a lot of air get let out of the Chiefs. Now, we knew they were going to try to do something coming back in the third quarter, but it didn't happen.
I mean,
And
you could see it on Kelsey's face, Mahomes' face, Chris Jones's face.
But
I mean,
with all the
constant.
talk about Mahomes and by the way, none of that's going to stop.
It should.
We know it should stop, right? About him being the best ever, but it's not going to. Matt Chatham had a really nice post on X where he said, if you think the Mahomes hype train is going to stop in regards to him and Brady, it's not. People are going to cherry pick.
No,
But
no, it won't. It won't stop, Steve. And we can transition to that if you want to. I'll let you dictate where you want to go.
I was just making a point, that the fact is he had that opportunity to, strike lightning in a bottle like Brady did, right? You're in the Super Bowl, you're down by 24. Now, Brady was down by 25, and Brady was actually down by 25 late in the third quarter. But, everything's right in front of you right there. Everyone's talking about three-peat, and, the Brady stuff. Now it's all laid out right in front of you, and he had that opportunity, and he couldn't do it.
Well, and look, I'm not gonna knock Mahomes necessarily for, not being able to win the game. He should get credit for getting to the game, okay? But I do think it does it definitely, without argument. I mean, it's literally inarguable that it hurts the whole Chiefs. Let's be honest. There's a recency bias thing. This whole Chiefs comparing themselves to the Patriots dynasty thing. It's like let's just see when it's over. Let's stack them together and go side to side. But you know what? If you want to do the Felger, and Maz, like we have a show to do today, so we got to compare them right now. Okay. Well, you know what? Brady hasn't gotten blown out in 2 Super Bowls. I've never seen Brady. I quite literally, and this is not hyperbolic. I quite literally cannot remember a game that Patrick Mahomes has played as a professional athlete that was as bad as the one he played. I thought he was horrendous. I thought he held the ball on too long. I thought he made bad decisions. I thought he was forcing it. I thought Andy Reid made no adjustments. I thought Travis Kelce looked absolutely washed, whether he's hurt or whatever. I know on the offensive line they were kind of scrambling some things around. Joe Tooney got whipped constantly, who's been a terrific pro, but he was playing out of position. I mean, so many different things, but there were guys that were just not performing. They choked when it mattered the most collectively. And that is going to hurt their legacy no matter what, So if you want to go ahead and compare Patriots Chiefs, fine, go ahead. But I've never seen the Patriots or Bill Belichick get beat like that in the Super Bowl when it mattered the most. That was really pathetic, and I think it threw a lot of cold water on a lot of the people who wanted to go ahead and say that. If you want to say that Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback in NFL history, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. You could say he's the modern day John Elway. I'm not going to argue that Mahomes is more physically talented than Brady, but it's okay to say that a quarterback who's really good played like crap and came up short, and that's what happened to him. And so all these people that want to anoint him as God's gift to quarterbacking also have to go ahead and take their medicine and say, hey, you know what? He shrunk when it mattered the most twice so far in his career.
Mm-hmm. And one of them was to Brady.
Yeah, I mean, he's lost his two biggest losses in his career were both to Brady. One in the AFC Championship game and once in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, that's just a fact. So you can go head to head if you want to. You can go stats. You can go whatever. Again, it's like you say things like that, and it sounds like you're like saying like he sucks. I'm not saying that Mahomes sucks. I'm just like pump the brakes on the GOAT talk. Everything has to happen like as it's happening right now. It's like he might be. But let's see. How long have we talked about Patrick Mahomes? Like, let's see what happens. He's 29. He's going to be 30 by the time the next season starts. Let's see what happens as he gets into his 30s. Let's see what happens as Andy Reid goes ahead and phases out.
Hold that thought, because
okay.
You always throw me a little curveball. I thought of one for you tonight.
I love it. Please.
Okay. Is the Kansas City Chiefs window closing? And I don't mean, are they going to fall apart?
Yeah.
Is the window with Mahomes, Kelsey, and Andy Reid starting to close?
Yes. Emphatically, yes. And here's why. Because Andy Reid only has Patrick Mahomes. I don't know how long he'll play for, and I'm not going to doubt his ability. There's no one doubting his ability. If you do, then that's on you. But I'm not sitting here. I don't want to come off like some kind of like Patrick Mahomes hater. I think he's phenomenal to watch. No doubting the ability, no doubting the drive. I like his competitiveness. I think that he has something that you can only teach in certain athletes where you have like some kind of certain drive, Steve. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But Andy Reid has a finite amount of time, and that roster needs to be retooled. Travis Kelce might have one more. There were rumors about him retiring. I don't think he will. I think he'll come back for at least one more year, but call it 2 years. He's not the same player. He looked like a shell of himself this last week. And again, we might find out that it was just an injury. Maybe we do. But you have what? Some kind of like revolving door of running backs. And then you have an offensive line that needs some help. You need a tight end replacement for Kelsey, or at least something to groom behind him. And you have Xavier Worthy, who I thought had a really good year as a rookie from Texas and really shown some stuff. I don't think he has the number one, quote unquote, ability, but he can be a top 2 target. But that offense needs help, and they need to retool. And this is the thing that I feel like some people, Steve, are so short-sighted with, is because when you talk about the Patriots dynasty, the thing that was most impressive was their ability to consistently compete and rebuild or retool on the go. And now this is where the Chiefs' challenge is. So don't talk to me about the Chiefs like success the first couple of years. Yes, I know it's great. I acknowledge it's great. No one's denying that. I want to see now how they do it. How is it going to go in Andy Reid's last 4 years coaching? How's it going to be when they lose a Hall of Fame tight end in Travis Kelce? How are they going to do when they have to rebuild the receiver room? When they need a tackle? When they need a guard? Because they're probably going to lose Trey Smith in free agency. When they go ahead and give Patrick Mahomes help because he's going to get older and older. He's not going to be able to run around and take the hits that he's been taking for the last 6-7 years. That to me will be the challenge, and that will be the measuring stick. So to answer your question, yes, it is closing. Now, it will never be closed. As long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback of the Chiefs, their window will never be closed. I'd say that for the Ravens. I'd say that for the Bills. I'd say that for the Chiefs. To me, those guys, when you're that special, that window won't be closed. Now, what the Eagles prove to you is, even though I think Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback, I think what the Eagles showed you is you don't need to have a guy that's necessarily, out of this world different, like some of those guys are I just mentioned, to win it all. You can draft, develop, make smart moves, and build your roster around him. Now, again, Allen, Jackson, Holmes, call them 100 out of 100. Okay, maybe Jalen Hurts is 88, 90. Okay, he's not quite that level, but he's really good. Well, you don't have to have that guy. I feel like sometimes you have to feel like it's like this guy has to get you totally over the hump. Now, I don't think you're going to see very many Trent Dilfers winning Super Bowls. All due respect to Trent Dilfer. He had one of the greatest defenses of all time with the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. But I do think that the Eagles showed you that the model of building your team and making the right draft moves, that's why the draft and develop philosophy to me has always been the most important. They showcased it this last week.
Yeah, because when I look at this, You know, like you said, Kelsey looks like a shell of himself at this point in his career. You know, whether or not he's hurt, we don't know. But I mean, awful attempts at trying to block, I mean, those were standing out, right? And, you know, he didn't really do much during the game. But, I mean, he's had games like that where teams make a premium of trying to take him away because that's, Mahomes' favorite target. But, he just does not look like himself anymore. I think he's reached that point of diminishing returns. Andy Reid, though, they asked him after the game, and he said, "I'll be back next year." So I'm taking that he's he's at that point where maybe next year is it for him. And
I think him and Kelsey, Steve, are going to be, probably 2 years tops each of them, and I think that it's closer to one. But well, I mean, at the same time, I don't think it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be one of those things where, let's be honest. There's going to be a line of people who, and all good candidates, who are going to be lining up for that KC head coaching job because they're all going to want to coach Patrick Mahomes. Who wouldn't? So, but it's going to be replacing that talent, replacing that receiver room.
If Reed does retire, right, who's going to want to be there first? And that's Sean McVay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that would be dangerous. That'd be so dangerous.
Because right now their quarterback is getting old. In LA, and they played well this year though.
Mm-hmm.
But Stafford's getting old. And, you have to wonder if next year might be it for him.
Right.
And I was just thinking of that. I was like, if Andy Reid does retire at the end of next year, Sean McVay would probably love to get that job.
100%. We got to go to break. But before we do, Steve, any other final thoughts on the Super Bowl?
No, kudos to the Eagles. We did not expect that.
I predicted 27-23, not 40-22. So.
And it was really, think about it.
It was really like 40 to like, I don't
6.
know. Yeah, it was those last 2 touchdowns were pretty weak. Especially the last one. I mean, that was literally at least 40-15. It was pretty bad. After that Cooper DeJean play, you just felt like you were like, wow, this is not only happening, it's not only happening, but it's like you could feel it in the stadium, you could feel it through the TV, you could see it on the Chiefs' faces. They were just shell-shocked, and there was just no coming back from that.
Can I make a petty personal point?
Sure.
I remember in 2007, the Patriots had that same look on their face, and it was because of Spagnuolo.
Yep.
Because he put on a show that night, right? We all remember that.
The NASCAR package, I remember.
Yeah.
I have nightmares about it weekly still.
Yep. But he had that look on Sunday night, and I know he's a Grafton, Mass guy, and I covered Grafton, for years, high school football, and I love Grafton, but I took a little bit of pleasure out of seeing him with that look on his face. 15 years too late, but
this is going to make me sound like a petty Patriots fan. I was happy the Chiefs lost because I am protective of the Patriots dynasty. At the same time, I can acknowledge that Mahomes and Andy Reid and the Chiefs have done something really special. I didn't want to see them do 3 in a row just because I didn't want them to do it, not someone else to do it like us when we had the opportunity back in 2005 or whatever.
Well,
and
against the Eagles.
I guess the Eagles
because the Patriots went to 3 in a row.
Right. So So
And
I guess for me, Steve, it was kind of nice to see that as a petty Patriots fan, um, for them not to get there, and it makes me happy for the Eagles, not because they're fans. I think I think Philadelphia fans are some of the most scum of the earth people of all time.
as we saw on Sunday night.
Yep, of course. But I do think Jeffrey Lurie is a good owner. I think he invests. I think Howie Roseman has absolutely done pretty much a textbook job on how to build a winner, and they've built their team the right way. And as two guys who love the draft process and develop process, they are something to be studied because they've pretty much played chess while everyone else is playing checkers. As far as team building goes, I mean, they've really think about some of their drafts, go through their drafts and look at the hit after hit after hit. And that's really what you want to go ahead and accomplish. So anyway, we are going to take a break here for podcast purposes. And when we get back, Steve and I are going to give our foreshadowing thoughts on the offseason coming up for the Patriots, as well as the NFL Combine and NFL free agency. Back right after this. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri, both PatsFans.com bloggers. We spent the first half of the show talking about the Super Bowl, Steve, and the Eagles' 40-22 win over the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess we're going to kind of shift because as the season's over, which is sad, but we are going to shift to the NFL Combine, which is starting on the 27th of February. So we're recording this on the 12th. We'll probably post this on the 13th. So we're about 2 weeks away, give or take. We'll do a deeper dive before the Combine starts. So this is a very just kind of skimming the top of the basket here. Give me your take on the Combine and kind of what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, it's always an exciting time because Super Bowl's over. This Sunday we'll have the Super Bowl hangover, and we'll be jonesing for some football. But at the same time, with the with the Combine coming up, it's an opportunity to see some of these young guys come up. There's always some surprises there. Some guys have really prepared for the Combine, and they show out incredibly well, and so that's always exciting. And then when you get to see a player that you heard about that's rumored maybe go with New England, you see him, what he can do athletically in these tests, and it's always fun. And then of course Rich Eisen does such a great job. It makes the whole thing just gel.
Right. Is there? This is a little bit of a curveball, but I mean, you don't have. We'll get into this again more in the next week or two. But is there a player or position group that you're most interested in seeing? For whatever reason.
And it's not the guys who are going to be blowing people away, right, with their athletic ability. It's
offensive
the tackles.
Line.
Yeah, offensive line, the tackles. I mean, let's see how these guys test out.
The arm length is going to be a big one. That's going to be a huge talking point. Anyone who's listening to the show, I'm sure they listen to other Patriots podcasts. It's going to be all about arm length for a lot of these guys because that's going to dictate if they're eligible to go to a, I mean, obviously they're all eligible, but you know what I mean? That's going to be a big talking point going in. Is Will Campbell's arms, are they at the 34-inch threshold? Are they at 33? Is he going to be a guard? What's Kelvin Banks look like? Let's talk about Joshua Sims in the 20s. There's going to be a lot of talk about that. For me, Steve, it's going to be the quarterbacks, but not because of how it affects the Patriots for their own roster, for how it will affect what they decide to do. Obviously, we'll see, who's on the board when they get there, and we'll talk about it. But that could open up potential trade opportunities and other things. So I think, to me, the quarterbacks and the offensive tackles, like you said, I think are both going to be two of the most interesting things, because if I think the thing the Patriots, fans should go ahead and hope for the most is that the quarterbacks show out over the next couple months,
Yeah.
because that you don't go broke taking a profit. And if you go ahead and you want to say you want Travis Hunter, say you want Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, whoever it is, Ted McMillan, whoever you want, the best thing that can happen is that the quarterbacks, you have a bidding war. Because let's be honest, of all those guys, the most important thing is that you need to go ahead and get a good player and establish assets. So if you can get both because you move back 2 spots and can still get it, well, the best way that's going to happen is if Cam Ward and Shador go in the first, couple of picks, because that's going to give you the most options available and you'll be able to pick that. So to me, that's going to be the biggest thing, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry about that.
The best thing you could hope for with the combine coming up is that every one of the quarterbacks just looks fantastic, because that might generate some interest in people moving up.
Mm-hmm.
And, the more people want to move up, the better it is for the Patriots. And, maybe they can trade back and collect some more, really good draft capital.
Well, so just use the 3 guys I just named, just for sake of conversation. If you want, like to me, like I would like Abdul Carter, like that would be my number 1 choice. Now you have to have 3 players go in front of him. I doubt it's going to happen at this point, but we'll see. Travis Hunter, okay. Also, I'd like to see happen. Well, you can only get a chance at one of those 2 guys if you have 2 quarterbacks go in the top 3. Okay, so you have that going for you. If for some reason there's a quarterback, say it's Sanders at 4, he's available. It was Carter, some combination of Cam Ward, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter in the top 3, and you're sitting there with Shador Sanders. Well, you could potentially, very realistically, move to 4 to 6, pick up a second rounder this year and a second rounder next year, and still get Will Campbell. You can come away with a really good lineman and that would mean that you would have the 37th and 38th overall pick. So you could have 3 picks in the top 38 and have an extra second round pick. So if you want to go ahead and trade for a receiver, next year, you have the extra capital to do that. Plus you go ahead and add 2 players, still get a good offensive lineman. And so that could be a win-win-win. But again, I do think the measurements are going to be vital for the offensive line at the combine, Steve. I think. And then there's always the good, chumming around, rumor mill between all the insiders, the agents, the players, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as free agency goes, anything else you want to mention on that?
Free agency? Well, I mean, I saw 3 guys during the game on Sunday that I would love to see the Patriots pick up.
Before you say the names, I would just say this, that I think people need to remember that you got to take this in steps. And I know it's hard because it's easy to put the cart in front of the horse, but you got to do the combine first. But then you have to scroll back a little bit, because then you got to go ahead and go through free agency. Free agency is going to dictate a lot of the draft, and then you go back to the draft, and then you can do that, and then we can get into going ahead and how Vrabel and Elliott Wolf are going to go ahead and manipulate the roster. So there's going to be a couple different steps. It's not all necessarily linear, but go ahead with your point.
Yeah, because I was just watching the game, and you're as you're watching the game and it goes to a commercial, your wheels start turning and like, that guy's a free agent. Oh, that guy's a free agent. So I was just looking at it from that perspective. From that game, 3 of the free agents in that game. One,
look at the Williams, the defensive tackle for the Eagles, Zach Bond, Josh Sweat. You could go 3 out of their top 7 if you want to.
And then Trey Smith, the interior offensive lineman,
the left guard for the Chiefs.
Yes, yeah. I was watching him and I'm like, man, that guy's a free agent. That would be a nice pickup. and Josh Sweat, obviously, and of course Zach Bond, which I think the Eagles fans will have a repeat of Sunday night if they let Zach Bond go.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you two things. Let me ask you two things related to the names that we just mentioned. Kind of different ends. I like Trey Smith a lot, the left guard for the Chiefs. Do you have any hesitation about giving somebody a big contract who's a left guard when you already are paying a right guard $19 million?
No, because he's still young. I think he's what, 27,
Yeah,
or
he's in
will be
his
27 when the
he's in his
season
mid to late
starts.
20s, but he's got time left. I mean, it's not like
Yeah,
that. I mean, I would pay him too. I guess my only thing is, man, it's like I think guards are important, but I don't want to have $36 million a year tied up in guards, you know.
well, that's very true. But we don't know if they're going to move a when you back out, because right tackles still. I know they really like the young kid, right? And there's a lot to like there, but he's still unproven at this point.
Well, if they were going to do Caden Wallace at right tackle and when you at left or right guard, and they're going to go with David Andrews and then Trey Smith, and then you go ahead and you draft Will Campbell and he's left tackle. I mean, all of a sudden your line looking a lot better.
Yeah, yeah,
Drake
yeah.
May might have a second to friggin' take a second breath. I mean, who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah. I mean, think about it. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they could fix the offensive line really quickly this offseason. Not
Well,
saying that.
the thing is though too, Steve, is that and look, I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but I still have as much as I think that T. Higgins is a possibility for the Patriots, because I think that if he actually becomes available, they are going to throw him money that no other team will be willing to make. I think that the Crafts are going to want to make a statement for the fans and get some excitement back. So they're going to want to throw some money around. I'm not saying it's going to be every player, but I think they want some kind of a splash move. I think this is a thing.
They need it with the fan base right now.
Right. But if Higgins is not available, I think that, Trey Smith is great, but is that going to really get a bunch of juice? I'm not sure, but like, is Josh Sweat, is he going to go ahead and bring some juice? Probably something, but I mean, I don't know if the Eagles are going to let Sweat, Milton, Bond all go, and you're not going to sign them all. You're not going to win through free agency. We know that. Okay. The other part of me too, Steve, is that it's like, I think to me the priority needs to be the trenches, and if they can solidify the trenches, as much as people don't want to hear this, the receiver is the cherry on top. It's not the ice cream. You need to go ahead and take care of that line on both sides of the ball. The Eagles just proved it. Let's not forget, going back to the Patriots in 2019, let's not forget how dominant, the offensive line was there when you still had Scar, you still had Bill Belichick, you had Trent Brown playing at like an all-pro level. Like, it was a very good line, and they were crushing it, and they were running the ball like crazy down people's throats. I mean, I had to listen to Russ tell me about how great Sony Michel was because of that one postseason game that he had against the Chargers. So I mean, the lines are important.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, that's what drives the train. And Vrabel said it starts in the trenches.
Right.
Would I love to see T. Higgins? Who wouldn't?
Of course.
I honestly don't think they're going to be able to entice him to come. I think if he leaves Cincinnati, he's going to want to go compete for a Super Bowl, and we both know the Patriots won't be doing that at least next year.
I agree. I would just say that the problem, I have a hard time thinking he's going to leave Cincinnati. I know that Burrow's made some comments talking about it. The thing I would say against it, though, is you can't pay everybody. That's just the reality. The reality is that you just can't. And they haven't paid Chase yet. And with all due respect to T. Higgins, he's not Jamar Chase. Like, he's not Justin Jefferson. T. Higgins is a really good player. But he's a lower end number one receiver, which is why the Bengals have been so good, because they have two number one receivers, but they have Jamar Chase, and they're going to pay him before they pay T.
Oh, of course.
And they paid Burrow, and they're doing everything else, and they just paid Trey Hendrickson and whoever else on defense. Like, you have to make business decisions. Sometimes it's just your time to come up. So I don't know. We'll get to free agency later. We're just kind of giving a little bit of a preview. We got weeks to talk about it. So anyone who's listening, if you have a question or a category or a segment or whatever that you want us to talk about, go nuts. Please send it to us, tweet it to us, because I'm more than happy to do that. I guess to me, Steve, it's just going to be, again, taking it one step at a time. Right now, you have to think, in my mind, Vrabel's taken over. They finalized the coaching staff, which is available on PatsFans.com. We've talked about it in past shows, but in case you want to look at it. And then they got to do like an autopsy of the roster. We both have talked about in the past two shows how we think there's going to be a lot of turnover. They got to go ahead and figure out what direction they want to take the team, what the locker room culture is going to be like, what's the identity of the football team, and how they're going to go ahead and shift gears. I do think that the Super Bowl was interesting for kind of laying out how certain things are done in this day and age of the NFL. But I do think that the next 2 weeks leading up to Indy and Indianapolis itself, between the upcoming players, the agents, and everything else, I think it's going to be really fascinating to hear about all those rumors. And then we can kind of backtrack into free agency because it's a little premature. I guess my last final thought before I go to you to close the show would be that it was a boring Super Bowl, but I do think the better team won, which makes me happy.
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, this was a no-doubter, and the officials, despite how the game started, were not the talk of the game. That was the best thing that came out of this Super Bowl.
Well, it's funny you said that, because at the beginning of the game that wasn't the case. I mean, that first penalty against AJ Brown, I was saying, or just my wife and I sitting on the couch, and I'm just saying to myself, like, oh my God, they're gonna go ahead and, like, this is gonna just throw logs onto the fire of the whole, like, Chiefs referee controversy. And then there was that horrific call against McDuffie on the unnecessary roughness. And thankfully, I think what happened was someone from the NFL, which I'm glad happened, someone from the New York offices called down and was like, you guys got to swallow these whistles, because they can't afford that. There was over $1.3 billion bet on the Super Bowl. The NFL's in bed with all these sports books. They can't have anybody questioning the legitimacy of the integrity of the game.
Couldn't agree more. But, it didn't turn out that way.
Nope. Thankfully.
They let the players play, and, they called the penalties that needed to be called. And that's all you can ask for, But, again, it was clear cut who the better team was, and you have to give them the credit. I'm not a big Eagles fan, but boy, they sure looked awesome.
No, Philadelphia sucks. So anyone who's listening to this show, you guys can all suck it. But I'm happy you guys won. So enjoy it while you can.
Well, they look like a team that could hang around for a couple of years.
No, they again, Howie Roseman deserves all the credit. He's just built an incredible team. Really impressive. Again, which is, as I said before, it's a testament to what both you and I love, a perfect team building kind of clinic he's put on over the last couple of years. I mean, go back, look at a couple of the last drafts, a couple of the free agent moves. Zach Bond. Did anybody hear about Zach Bond before this year? Or are we talking about Milton as a free agent that's going to get paid We're talking about Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, and Josh Sweat was what, a 4th round draft pick, I want to say. Like, like that. It's just one of those things that I forget. I keep saying Milton. I can't remember if it's Milton or Williams. It might be Williams actually. But regardless, I just think they deserve a lot of credit for putting that team together. So, well, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For Steve Balestrieri, I am Derek Havens. We'll be back next week to talk about the Combine, preview that. Please do subscribe to us on our Patriots 4th and 2 YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, share, and leave us a review on our Apple Podcast station so that we can go ahead and stay high in the podcast rankings where other Patriots fans can find us. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.